So here's a real hot take. People like to laugh. Saving the galaxy? Meh. Shooting Nazi zombies? Meh. All that's kind of cool, but can you make it funny? Can games by design be funny? I mean, yeah, kind of. It depends. But yes. The thing is, comedy in games is pretty unique to the medium, and it comes with its own whole set of rules and hurdles that it has to deal with. With all these various roadblocks in place, it's difficult to do it really well and requires a lot of extra effort. So in this video, we're going to examine the bizarre nature of comedy in video games. Will this video be funny? Yeah, right. But there will be memes. So let me take all the fun out of comedy by first taking a moment to try to explain how comedy works. What make people go haha? If you're under 21, it's probably memes. If you're over 30, it's probably memes, but about depression. It can be anything from physical humor to structured jokes. There are a lot of different styles, but basically what it boils down to mostly is setup and punchline with good delivery. Delivery will often dictate whether a joke lands like a gymnast or like the Titanic. Hindenburg, wrong tragedy. See, if I had good delivery, that joke actually would have been funny. Movies and TV shows have a pretty easy time with delivery as everything is literally scripted, but there are a number of issues that make copying this format into video games super hard. The biggest issue being that the medium is player-driven and gamers are unpredictable. Outside of a scripted cutscene, you have no control over what a player is going to do, so trying to set up a well-timed joke is nearly impossible. The other major issue that you'll run into is length.
That's what she said!
A game is considered short if it's under 15 hours. That's a very long time to try to be consistently funny without crossing that line into irritating. A quip shouted by a character during gameplay may start off as funny, but it becomes really annoying after the 20th time you've heard it. And since games are meant to be played over multiple sessions, it becomes basically impossible to generate any sort of comedic flow or do callback jokes, as it may be days between when someone starts a game and when they finish it. What's so special about humor in games that even when a game is considered funny, with super hilarious moments, rarely do these moments bleed into pop culture like other mediums do.
Cannonball!
Having so many laughable moments, or what could be, like I said, multiple sessions with gamers leading the story in the direction that they want, makes it rare that a singular scene will stand out as a quotable moment. Gamers may often miss or ignore total parts of the story and skip entire cutscenes. So, oddly enough, the funniest parts of games don't usually come from a scripted moment in the game itself, but from some sort of meme or user-generated content.
Alright, thumbs up.
Ready, guys?
Let's do this. Leroy Dragons!
These sort of moments can range from a repetitive line, to a quest, to a potential reward, or really anything that the internet decides to latch onto. Comedy isn't even considered a genre in video games. Using funny as a descriptor is probably as close as you're going to get. You would say something like, I played this truly funny RPG, if you were pretentious like me. Humor doesn't define the game, it's just a part of it. The gameplay and the story themselves still have to do all the heavy lifting. This is sort of like a double-edged sword, or a catch-22. This is an idiom. Good jokes won't make a bad game good, but conversely, rarely can a game with solid gameplay and story ever truly devolve into being bad just because of terrible humor. That's a complex way of saying no one is going to describe a game as mechanically and story-wise, this was amazing, but it was so unfunny that I hated it. Bad humor is often just a symptom of a bad game, and not what makes the game bad. For some examples that have tried to be funny and have failed spectacularly, look no further than Duke Nukem Forever or the new Wolfenstein Youngblood games. These are two games that rely on comedy to carry the fun, but are so poorly designed at their core that the horrible humor is just another piece of glass in an already terrible sandwich. Of course, there are a number of games that you may not find funny, but humor is subjective. What's not funny to you may be hilarious to someone else. Take Sunset Overdrive and Saints Row 4, for example. To me, these are games that just try way too hard to be funny, to the point where they don't appeal to me, even though I liked the older Saints Row games. They score really well, so I guess I'm just too old to enjoy the humor of the youths today, as written by 30-plus-year-old marketing teams. There are quite a few games that have managed to pull off this impressive feat of being funny and a good game, and oddly enough, they all tend to be set in dystopian futures. This is partially due to the fact that these settings allow for some extreme levels of wackiness that the players are just completely willing to accept.
Oh, I'm having a stellar day, and not just because I'm legally obligated to say so. Almost as stellar as a Spacer's Choice is affordable.
Additionally, the humor found here acts as a perfect counterweight to what would otherwise be some incredibly dark gameplay or overpowering bleakness of worlds filled with people devoid of hope. But for an example of a game that absolutely nails what it means to be a comedy game, look no further than the Borderlands 2 expansion, Tiny Tina's Assault on Dragon Keep. This is a laugh-out-loud funny experience from start to finish, with jokes on display throughout every facet of it, with a surprisingly strong gut-punch story arc. In a confusing nutshell, this expansion takes the characters from the first Borderlands game and has them roleplay as the characters from the second Borderlands game inside a game of Dungeons & Dragons, which they call Bunkers and Badasses. It's framed as a way for them to pass the time and is hosted by Tiny Tina, the wildly energetic 13-year-old explosives lover that talks like an early 2000s Snoop Dogg. It's just so over the top and oozes comedy from every seam. Everything from the expected Borderlands humor, to pop culture, to poking fun at their own game with subtle jokes like calling the main town in the game Flame Rock when the first place you visited in Borderlands was called Fire Rock. You get it? There are also some very excellent Dungeons & Dragons jokes thrown in here that go beyond ha 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 nerdy fantasy. They clearly understand the source material, and even go so far as to add things in like basic puzzles that you would never have seen in a previous iteration of the game, but is expected from D&D. It's enough to do the classic game justice while still making it funny to anyone who maybe has never played D&D before. Much like the narrating characters themselves, who chime in constantly with their first-time player antics in the most accurate ways.
I punch him!
Brick, don't. If you just talk to him, we can...
I punch him!
What makes all this work is the fact that none of it seems out of place. It's never ridiculous just for the sake of it. The traditional Borderlands enemies have been replaced with all the standard fantasy creatures you come to expect, like skeletons and orcs and, of course, mimics. I mean, dragons. Beloved characters from the Borderlands series appear in various ways, usually as fantasy versions of themselves. Everything in the world is familiar with a nice D&D facelift. For all its perceived immaturity, Borderlands really knows how to pace itself. It knows when to crack jokes and when to ease up and let the players just have fun, to let them find the humor in the world and the gameplay. How this expansion manages to elevate itself beyond just a funny one-off is how it uses humor as a facade for a much more emotionally charged story. It eventually becomes apparent that this isn't just a wacky game of D&D for the sake of it, but is actually a way for Tina to process the death of Roland at the hand of the game's main villain in the Borderlands storyline. Roland appears throughout Tina's story as a brave knight, and she always hand-waves away any comments from the group that may hint that Roland is actually gone and not coming back. It all culminates in a devastating boiling point where the group stops dancing around the issue and forces Tina to deal with the reality of Roland's death. For a moment, she drops her wacky persona and crushingly admits that she knows the truth, but that here in her story, he doesn't have to be gone, that she gets to have the ending that she wants. It's jaw-dropping, and it's what makes this game stand out from any others. Borderlands figured it out. They were able to use humor as a supporting mechanism to heighten the emotional energy of the main story. In the end, making the game not only a hilarious experience, but a memorable one. Choosing to make a funny game adds an extra level of difficulty to any project, especially when it can affect everything from the writing to the characters, the quest design, and even mundane features like menus. All of this, and the jokes may not even land, like my jokes. You run the risk that all of it comes off as too try-hard, or at worst, irritating. The addition of comedy can elevate a strong game to even higher heights. However, it can't do much to save a bad game. Like a fart at a funeral, it might get some laughs, but it won't improve the situation. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any recommendations for me in terms of games I should check out that are hilarious, let me know. And as always, classic outro. Jokes on display through every facet of it with surprise.